You did nothing wrong. You know that. Every rational part of your brain has already confirmed it. And yet, somewhere in your chest, there it is. That low, uncomfortable pull. That quiet sense that you owe someone something, that you are somehow to blame. You have felt this before. Maybe after saying no to a friend. Maybe after leaving a party early. Maybe after doing absolutely nothing except existing in the same room as someone who seemed upset. The guilt arrives uninvited, sets up camp, and refuses to explain itself. Here is what no one tells you. That feeling is not a flaw. It is one of the most sophisticated survival mechanisms your species ever developed. And it is running inside you right now, exactly as designed, thousands of years past its expiration date. To understand why, you have to go back. Far back. Back before cities, before writing, before agriculture. Back to a version of you that lived in a small group of roughly 50 to 150 people, completely dependent on every single one of them for survival. In that world, belonging was everything. Not belonging was death. If the group turned on you, if they decided you were selfish, unreliable, or a threat, you were cast out. Alone on the savannah. No shelter, no food, no protection. Exile was not a punishment. It was an execution with extra steps. Your ancestors who survived were not the strongest ones. They were not the fastest or the most aggressive. They were the ones best at reading the room, best at anticipating how their actions would land, best at adjusting their behavior before anyone had a chance to get angry. They were the ones who felt the warning signal early and corrected course. That warning signal was guilt. The social psychologist Jonathan Haidt has spent decades studying moral emotions, and what he found upends the way most people think about guilt. Guilt, in his framework, is not fundamentally about what you did. It is about what your social standing might become if others found out. It is a pre-emptive repair signal, a social alarm system built to fire before the damage happens, not after. This is why you can feel guilty for things you never did. The system is not checking your actions. It is checking your exposure. It is asking, could someone perceive this as a violation? Could this cost you the group's approval? If the answer is yes, even hypothetically, the alarm sounds. Think about what that means. Your guilt reflex has no internal fact checker. It does not distinguish between actually hurting someone and merely worrying that someone might feel hurt. It does not ask whether your intentions were good. It asks only one question. Are you safe inside the group right now? And if there is any doubt, any ambiguity at all, it answers no. And it floods your system with that familiar ache. Researcher Price Tangney, one of the leading psychologists studying shame and guilt, found something crucial in her work. People who score high on what she calls maladaptive guilt, guilt that activates without any real wrongdoing, are not weaker or more neurotic than average. They are, in many cases, more empathic, more socially attuned, more aware of how their behavior affects others. The very sensitivity that makes someone prone to unwarranted guilt is the same sensitivity that makes them a reliable, considerate member of a community. Evolution did not build a precise instrument here. It built a hair trigger. It built a system that would rather fire 1,000 false alarms than miss a single real threat. Because in a group of 50 people where one bad social rupture could get you exiled, erring on the side of guilt was always the safer bet. Your brain inherited that bet. Now consider the modern world you are actually living in. You are not in a band of 50. You interact with hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. You have an online presence visible to people who have never met you. You make choices that affect friends, colleagues, strangers, and everyone in between. The social field your guilt system is trying to monitor has exploded in size, but the system itself has not changed. It is still running the same ancient code, scanning for tribal disapproval in a world so vast and complex that disapproval is essentially unavoidable. Someone, somewhere, is always going to be unhappy with a choice you made. Your ancient brain reads that as danger, and the alarm fires. This is why modern guilt so often feels formless and disproportionate. You cancel plans with someone and feel genuinely terrible, even though they said they understood completely. You take a day off when you are exhausted and feel like a fraud for resting. You set a boundary, a reasonable, healthy, clearly communicated boundary, and you still spend the next 48 hours waiting for the fallout. The guilt is not responding to what happened. It is responding to what could, in some ancient calculus, lead to rejection. And rejection, to that deep part of your brain, is still equivalent to death. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, famous for his research on the social brain hypothesis, argues that the human neocortex expanded specifically to manage the complexity of group living. The cognitive load of tracking relationships, anticipating reactions, and managing your own reputation required more brain. And with more brain came more capacity for the emotions that regulate those relationships, including guilt. You are, in a very literal sense, guilt-prone because you are smart. Because your brain is large enough and socially wired enough to run simulations of other people's reactions to your behavior. Most animals cannot do this. You can. And the cost of that ability is that sometimes the simulation runs on its own, in the absence of any real threat, and produces a feeling that feels completely real anyway. So what do you do with that? The first thing you can do is recognize it for what it is. When guilt arrives uninvited, when you cannot point to any actual harm you caused, that is your ancient alarm system responding to perceived social risk, not moral failure. The feeling is real. The threat it's pointing to often is not. Psychologists call this the guilt check. Before accepting guilt as information, you ask a simple question. Did I actually cause harm? Not could someone be upset? Not might this be misread? Not what if they think badly of me? But did I genuinely, concretely cause harm to someone? If the answer is no, the guilt is noise. Old, evolutionary noise. Loud and convincing, but noise. The second thing to understand is that chronic, unwarranted guilt is not a sign of your goodness. This is the cruelest trick the system plays. It lets you believe that feeling guilty must mean you care, that the guilt itself is evidence of your moral worth. But Tangney's research makes clear that guilt which fires without cause does not make you a better person. It makes you a more anxious one. It consumes cognitive and emotional energy that could go toward actually helping people, actually showing up, actually doing the things you genuinely value. You were not built for this world. Your guilt was calibrated for a world where psychologists call this the guilt check. Before accepting guilt as information, you ask a simple question. Did I actually cause harm? Not could someone be upset? Not might this be misread? Not what if they think badly of me? But did I genuinely, concretely cause harm to someone? If the answer is no, the guilt is noise. Old, evolutionary noise. Loud and convincing, but noise. The second thing to understand is that chronic, unwarranted guilt is not a sign of your goodness. This is the cruelest trick the system plays. It lets you believe that feeling guilty must mean you care, that the guilt itself is evidence of your moral worth. But Tangney's research makes clear that guilt which fires without cause does not make you a better person. It makes you a more anxious one. It consumes cognitive and emotional energy that could go toward actually helping people, actually showing up, actually doing the things you genuinely value. You were not built for this world. Your guilt was calibrated for a world where every social error had immediate, visible, life-threatening consequences. In that world, the alarm made you safer. In this one, it often just makes you smaller. It keeps you saying yes when you should say no. It keeps you apologizing for taking up space. It keeps you scanning every room for signs of disapproval that your ancient brain reads as evidence that the group is about to turn. The group is not about to turn. And even if one person is upset with you, even if someone genuinely is unhappy with a choice you made, you are not going to be exiled to the savannah. You are not going to die alone in the dark. But your brain does not know that yet. Every time you sit with that formless guilt and let it pass without collapsing into apology, without over-explaining, without shrinking yourself to manage someone else's reaction, you are doing something your ancestors almost never could. You are overriding 300,000 years of survival code with something newer, something harder. The understanding that you are allowed to exist without owing everyone a constant accounting of yourself.